Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning, guys.
How are you doing this morning? Sorry, I should have started this second. So,
We're rolling a little slow this morning.
we are rolling a little slow this morning, but it's okay. It's really good. And you know what? We're just gonna let it go. Because I can't. Oh, there you go. All right.
We record these in a multiple formats, just so that way,
In case something goes
dies,
wonky with
because
this
we've
one,
learned that it can die.
it's happened.
So welcome to our new semi-format. We've
Yeah.
moved our table around so that we could
Do something different.
Actually look at each
other and talk to each other and all of that. So we are here. Welcome back. So just something to put out there. So we normally have called these Wednesday workshops, but
they've been
workshops. But we really want to transition these into more of a conversation, and so we're looking for a new name instead of Wednesday workshops.
You're putting that out there.
I'm putting that out there.
All right.
Why not? I mean, we might as well get some input, so we're not doing this in a vacuum.
True. Well, we have a tendency to name things second Saturdays, Taco Sundays. We thought of Wake Up Wednesday.
Wake Up Wednesday, but it's like it's another day of the week, so.
Except we're not good at waking up, so.
No, we're not. So, yeah, and we know a lot of people that watch this probably don't watch it at 8 o'clock in the morning either.
Right.
So,
yeah, a lot of our viewers happen long after this time. So,
yeah.
But anyway, we just want it to be more conversational. We have lots of things we want to talk about, but they're not necessarily like worthy of a whole entire workshop.
Yeah.
So, today, the topic, and we're probably going to do this topic for the next couple of weeks because there's
For sure.
so much to explore here.
So much to explore here.
But it's fun just to talk about and
Yeah.
not necessarily teach.
Yeah.
So you're going to get to hear what it's like at the Berry Kitchen Island.
You could have called it the kitchen island. At the island. It kind of looks like an island.
It is.
But yeah.
When we get talking about new revelations and things that we're learning, and as they get explored in our lives, we're like, oh man, do you realize about this or that?
Yeah.
So today we're going to do that with you about joy.
Joy.
And we have some really cool things to share as far as what joy is and thinking about it from a completely different aspect.
Yeah, we talk a lot about joy. We know you hear a lot of people say, we talk through joy and happiness are two different things. There's joy and emotion, or is it a feeling, or is it something deeper than that? Or, where does joy come from? Like a lot of people say, you'll hear in different circles, choose joy, just choose joy. Well, how do you do that? And what are you choosing?
Right. Yeah, as if it is just that simple, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, if we could choose things, life would be
I know. Just choose.
Just choose.
To have $1 million.
Right. Done.
So we're just gonna.
All right. So let's talk about like what is joy.
Yeah.
In our definition, we've learned it to be. So joy isn't just happiness. Like a lot of times we've heard people refer to joy as just be happy.
Just be happy, right?
Right.
It's not that at all. So joy is the experience of knowing that someone is happy to be with you. So
there's some key words in that definition.
That's what I was going to go back.
Yeah.
So it's the experiential, because we'll hear also too, because everything in your life is experiential. Your entire life is based on experience.
Right.
So
things aren't really real to you until you experience them.
Right. You can explain it away to somebody all you want, but unless you, like you said, unless you experience it, that you see it, you feel it yourself, it doesn't become true to you, and it doesn't get stuck in your brain as to this is what is.
Right. Yep.
So joy is the experience of knowing, or like you say, the deep knowing.
Yes, it's not just a feeling. We talked about that in our definition.
Yeah.
Is it a feeling? No, it's that deep knowing.
That someone is glad or happy to be with you.
Right. I was thinking this morning of the song, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. The funny thing is, joy is actually originated in your brain, which would make a lot less cool of a song. joy,
up in my brain.
Up in my brain.
In my prefrontal
Prefrontal cortex. Doesn't rhyme so
right here.
I mean, could be. We'll just stick with heart because that's where that's where that deep knowing comes, right?
Yeah.
Like you could say, well, I feel love for you, but it's almost like a deep knowing that I love you that actually, I don't know how to explain it. I think you guys know, like
Yeah.
I think all of us have felt that feeling, that
Yeah.
experience of knowing.
Yeah, and it's also I think I like the experience of knowing, but it's also the coming to know. So it's like it's like this continual knowing so it's this deep knowing, but then you're also continually coming to know
That's good.
that
Someone is
someone's
glad to be
glad
with you. Or happy to be with you.
Yeah,
Right.
You know.
So wait. So joy can't happen with one person.
No, that's one of those things that again, when people say choose joy, it's like, okay, well, how do I do that? Joy can only happen inside a relationship or inside a relationship with others.
Okay, right. Because it's knowing it's a relational knowing.
It's relational knowing. It's knowing that someone is glad to be with you.
Right.
It's not let me think of, like, you can go outside and look at the trees and enjoy the trees, you know, just because, and they make you happy because you see the trees. Like, happiness is something that it is a feeling. Happiness is a feeling, and actually joy is a feeling too. But we won't.
Yeah, we'll work on
that.
There's lots of conversation.
But happiness is one of those things where, like, I can go play golf by myself, and that makes me happy.
Right.
Because it's a feeling. It's a fleeting thing. It's 4 hours if I'm on a good day out there. Playing golf by myself, I'm happy.
I didn't think about how golf takes a long time if you're not very good.
It can be a really...
Wow.
Whoa.
It's a good thing you don't go with me. We'd be there all day.
Yeah. An 8-hour golf round.
It would be for
they
like
would kick us
for
off
like a 9
course.
hole.
They kick us off.
It would be
That
bad.
can't happen. But no, it didn't take me that long. But anyway, 4 hours on the golf course by myself makes me happy.
Right. However, that happiness can shift to joy, even if you're out there alone.
Correct. Because what happens is that we've talked about in one of our other workshops, actually our first workshop was about relational circuits and being relationally connected in that moment with God.
Yes.
Because He's with me.
So He's glad to be with you.
He's glad to be with me, and I'm glad to be with Him.
And you're experiencing the deep knowing of Him glad to be with you.
Exactly.
Out on the golf course.
Out on the golf course. So when that happens, now playing golf it also makes me happy, but it's also enjoyable, and I have joy in playing golf. Now here's where it switches.
Okay.
Because so if I think back on me playing golf last week, whenever, by myself, and I just think about being out on the course, I'm happy. And that feeling kind of, it's there. I mean, I kind of feel it. It's like, oh yeah, that was a fun time.
Right.
But if it was something where it was an experience with God on the golf course, and now I can think back on that time with Him on the golf course, now it turns into joy.
Right. Yeah. And oftentimes I think we live life so disconnected from ourselves, from God, in our just moment to moment experience. Like we normally wouldn't think about inviting God on the golf course or being aware of Him being glad to be with us on the golf course or whatever the circumstance might be. I think a lot of times we're just doing our thing and we forget that He's there.
Yeah.
And that's where I was, as you were talking, I was like, oh man, people don't know about manual journaling. Because a manual journaling is going back and re-experiencing that moment with the Lord and finding out where He was in the moment. So joy can actually be experienced even after the moment of realizing really He was glad to be with you. And
you can literally turn any moment with God into a joy moment.
Absolutely, because He's there all the time, right? We know that.
Yep.
We know that. We know that in the Word, but we don't know that. We don't actually experience it in real time like we could or should. Right,
because we don't take the time to
connect to Him and
be relational with Him.
And be relational, right.
Yeah.
And so manual journaling, if you haven't seen the video and you want to learn how to better experience the Lord in moments, either going back to moments or in the real moment.
Yeah.
I think I told you this. I don't know if I did or if I shared it with somebody else, but we went tubing. Did I tell you about this?
No,
we went tubing.
maybe.
Okay. We went tubing last weekend.
Possibly.
And the whole family was on the boat, and it was just a beautiful thing. It was just I don't know, just a really neat moment. We have a very eclectic family, and there's a lot of us. There's 10 of us all together.
Yep.
Between kids and grandkids. And I don't think we've ever gotten to get like in a vessel together, right? And so Anyway, I was out on the tube at one point. We were just heading back to the dock, and I was on the tube, and I'm just hanging on. I'm not actually tubing. And I was just getting like this bird's eye view of our family on the boat. And I asked Jesus where he was in the moment.
Oh, no, you
like,
didn't.
Yeah. And just wanting to experience that moment, just not for me, but because I had joy being glad to be with my people. But I also wanted to experience that moment with the Lord, and I wanted to know where he was.
Right.
He didn't show me himself on the boat, but I could definitely sense him being there. And so it was just kind of neat to like, since we've been practicing joy and we've been practicing Emmanuel journaling and learning how to go back and look to find him in moments. For the first time ever, I was reminded to actually ask him where he was in that moment.
In the moment. That's so cool.
So it was just kind of fun.
That's really cool. Yeah. I've done it in retrospect for that time we had together.
Right.
But no, that's really awesome. But but again, he's always with us. Again, he said he never leaves us or forsakes us, but I don't think we really understand what that means when he says he never leaves. Like literally, he never leaves.
Yeah.
Like he's in this room right now. He's in this place with us right now. He's wherever you are right now watching.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, amazing. Yeah.
And and I'd even ask him now, like if just say, Lord God, Jesus, where are you in this moment right now? I want this moment to be a joy moment with you. Where are you? Just take time to do that. I think that's huge, babe, because that's.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Gosh, it was fun. And I want to live more like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to live detached from him because I think we can
we
very
do.
easily. Like I can live detached from you, and you're like, I sleep next to you and wake up next to you and work
Sit
next
in the desk
to you.
next
And
to me. Right, yeah.
I'm just kidding. And I can
Makes
still
it
be,
sound like it's a bad thing.
that whole 24/7 thing that we got going on these days is interesting. But I can still be completely detached from you, and you're physically present with me 24/7. And so we're tangenting a little bit, but it tends to be what we do. So joy is the experience of knowing that someone is glad to be with you.
Yes.
So we know that the Lord is glad to be with us always, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other people aren't always glad to be with us.
Correct.
And joy is also a deep knowing of that you're glad to be with someone else.
Yes.
So you can actually be the one who's also like joy is actually a cyclical experience. Should be a cyclical experience.
Yes. And again, it's that relational experience. So you can't have only one person can't be in a relationship. You have to have two. So there may be times where you're not glad to be with me, and I'm not saying you, but
no,
you.
me. That would count.
That she's not glad to be with me.
Anybody else married?
But in that same moment, I can be extremely glad to be with you.
Right.
Even in your not wanting to be with me.
Right. How's that possible though?
Well, it's interesting because it's what we talk about. It's being with someone even in big emotions or big negative emotions.
Yeah.
And so if you're having a bad day or you're upset with me or you're whatever the case may be, me being glad to be with you even in the middle of that emotion helps connect me back to you, and it helps connect you back to me and back to God.
Right.
And what that looks like is...
So joy doesn't have to be all smiles.
No, not at all. You can absolutely be, those that have children, again, or married, you know that there's times where you have to have difficult conversations. We had some this weekend, and we just have to have conversations, and they can be uncomfortable. They can be not fun. But I can absolutely still be glad to be with you in the middle of those conversations. And it's just about being able to take a step back. It's a joy capacity, which we'll get into a little later.
Yeah, we'll talk about joy capacity in another video.
But being able to just return back to that place of joy. So if I start feeling myself getting weird, because then what I have to do is I have to take a step back, and I literally go and think about times that we spent together that brought us joy. That time that I knew that we were both glad to be with each other
in a happy way.
It
does help when you have joy capacity, where we talk about a joy bucket, and when your joy bucket is full of happy moments where you're glad to be together, like the boat experience for us. Yeah, that's in my joy bucket. So when I have to have a tough conversation with one of my kids or a tough conversation with you, like I have that joy capacity, that joy bucket with positive, happy, joy memories in it that make it easier and possible even for me to be with you, even in big emotion, whether my big emotion, your big emotion.
Yeah.
And we'll have to talk about that another time.
We
I
will.
don't want to get too much off on that, but
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about maturity, because we're coming out of the maturity series.
Yep.
So we referenced joy in our maturity series a couple times, and then we were like, oh man, we haven't talked about joy yet.
Here we go.
Here we go. So what does joy have to do with maturity? Why does that even matter?
So it matters a lot, because joy is actually being able to, so let me talk about in maturity, that there are needs and there's tasks that happen in maturity, and there's things that we have to be able to do in order to be mature in whatever stage we're in. So infant, child, adult, parent, elder, being able to do those tasks and complete those skills and do those maturity skills with joy.
Right. Yeah. With joy is the key.
Yeah. So there's things that we have to be able to do. So we can do them.
Right.
But are we doing them with joy?
Right. That really is the key sign of maturity.
Yes.
Of complete maturity is not just being a parent.
No, it's being able to be sacrificially a parent with joy.
So let's change that around and say with joy. So in order for me to be a mature parent, I need to be able to parent from a place of, I am glad to be with you.
Be glad, yes.
No matter, child. No matter what your experience at the moment. I think we're going to end up back at the 6 big emotions. I think that's kind of where we're supposed to go today.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those situations where there was a family that I was helping walk through some things, and that was one of those big things where their eldest child was just giving them so much grief, and they would try to do different things to try to correct and all these different things. And I just remember telling the parents, I'm just like, the biggest thing you need to let him know is that you are glad to be with him in the middle of whatever he's doing, in the middle of you correcting him, in the middle of you disciplining him, because he might need discipline, whatever is going on. But ultimately, it's about connection and attachment, which we'll get into another time, with your child. But them knowing that I'm glad to be with you in the middle of you writing all over my walls with permanent marker.
Right.
I am extremely glad to be with you because you are my son or my daughter, and you bring me joy.
I love you just for being.
Yeah.
Which is hard. Like,
that's why it's an adult maturity,
Yeah, right.
a parent maturity skill.
but it's something that actually has to be grown, and we're going to talk about probably next week. We should probably get into just what does it look like to build joy from the time that you're born. This is one of those things that if even what we're talking about right now sounds nearly impossible, of like, how do you feel glad to be with people who are acting a fool? Building joy capacity is the key to that. But I lost my train of thought a little bit. No, it's not your fault. So I was just thinking about your parent example, and my knowing that I'm glad to be with you even when you're really hard to be with. What I was going to talk about is that really our first instinct really is to withdraw.
Absolutely.
Most of us are like, I'm actually not glad to be with you.
No.
Thank you very much. If you're going to be an idiot, like, I'm good.
Right.
And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to withdraw all my feeling and relationship from you and put you on isolation island until you can pull yourself together and come back.
Isolation Island and Joy Camp. Here we go.
There you go.
Those and write those down.
So,
but no, you're right.
But that's not what the Lord does with us.
No.
He doesn't isolate us to isolation island and say, I'm not glad to be with you. Even in sin, he came.
So true.
Even in sin, he's with us. Can he approve of the sin? No. But can he love you just for you being? Absolutely.
Well,
and how do we do that as humans?
Yeah, it even goes back to, and if I'm off, tell me, but I don't believe I am in this one, but it goes back to what we even talk about with the name Table and Well, and we talk about the women at the well, and her being in sin, and her being in the middle of her mess, but yet Jesus was extremely happy to be with her.
That's so good. Yeah, he was.
He like, I don't know if you guys have seen the show The Chosen. It's a shameless plug. If you haven't seen it,
Watch it.
watch it. It's
amazing.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
but there's a scene in there where they set up the woman at the well, and they show Jesus talking to her at the well. And it's amazing because he is absolutely incredibly happy to be with her, and she can't receive it. Like, she can't.
In the beginning, no.
She can't understand.
She's like, why would you want to be with me? Like, why are you even talking to me? Do you even know?
Yeah, who I am and what I've done and da-da-da. And he's like, actually, yeah, I do. And I know this was your first husband and this is your second husband and this is where you're at now and da-da-da. But it was never in an accusing way. It was never in a way that says you need to change, you need to do something different with your life. It was 100%, I see where you are.
And I'm still glad to be with you.
I'm still glad to be with you. And you've been rejected 6 times. But I'm not going to reject you.
Yeah.
Because he was glad to be with her.
Right. And that's what changed her life.
That's what changed her life.
Is that knowing. Like, she could not believe that he would have...
Be willing.
And she experienced the deep knowing of Jesus being glad to be with her.
Yeah.
And it literally shifted everything.
Shifted everything in her life.
Yeah.
And not once did he tell her to change.
Nope. He did tell her, go sin no more.
No, different lady.
No, different lady.
Yeah.
Oops. We lost you.
We lost you.
Maybe
Sorry.
we're back. Okay. That's good.
But that was, So, but no, he absolutely loved her because...
Well, yeah, I know. The lady told her to go sin no more. Same experience,
Same experience, though. She experienced...
She was in sin.
Yep.
Undoubtedly had been dragged out and was ready to be fully punished for her sin.
Yep.
Didn't one person there want to be with her?
No.
She probably actually didn't want to be with herself.
No, probably not in the moment. Because she was... But, again, Jesus showed her compassion and showed her joy, and he wrote whatever he wrote on the sand, and they left, and he said he accepted her for who she was and
just
where
she was at.
And and
he stayed glad to be with her.
And that's the thing. They experienced so they ended up in both those cases, they experienced his joy, or they experienced the joy of him being glad to be with them.
Right.
And then in return, at the end of it, he was able to experience their joy of being glad to be with him. Yeah.
And I think even get to witness their learning, how you're talking about, like, it's a continual thing. It's not like a one-time knowing, but it's a continual practice of knowing. Like, they began to even learn to be glad to be with themselves, which I think is such a big thing that... I mean, our whole tagline is growing in relationship with God, yourself, and others, which even when we were coming up with it, we're just like, yourself. Gosh, that sounds so weird, like building relationship with yourself. But man, oh man, we're the worst at being relational with ourselves and actually being glad to be with us. I know at least that was a big part of my journey was learning how to be glad to be with me. And so when I got around other people, I wasn't glad to be with me, so I definitely was like, well, nobody else is glad to be with me either. So that wasn't, I mean, it was not fun for anyone, right? Because then people picked up on that, and then they weren't glad to be with me because I wasn't very glad to be with. And they didn't have joy capacity. They didn't know how to push past my, I guess, what I was putting off to still be glad to be with me.
Yeah, even the immaturity in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to talking about those 6 big emotions and being glad to be with people. And then we could probably tie a bow here for today. But so because this is still just mind blowing, and I think this is something that people who are listening can take away and practice this week. But they have to know, like, how do I get joy if, like, that's great to try to be glad to be with people in yucky times, but that's obviously a building thing. That's not something that, again, choose joy and just be joyful today and go be glad to be with people who are ugly.
And joy is not a choice, but there are choices that will allow you to choose it, but it's
So I think part of what we could just share today, one of the key places of the beginning of building joy, to even get to the point where, because I think it's, I don't want to say an advanced level skill to still be glad to be with people.
It is.
In one of the 6 big emotions, which we talked about in a different video. We've brought it up 6 times now.
We need to touch that.
So sadness, anger. Let's see, we're going to quiz ourselves. Sadness, anger, hopelessness, and despair. Shame. Gosh.
We never get these right.
Oh, this is sad.
It is. There it is. Sadness, anger,
hopelessness,
shame, hopelessness,
disgust,
despair, disgust, and I don't remember, guys.
It'll come. Right now we have 5 big emotions.
Yeah, 5 big emotions. There are 6. There are absolutely 6.
Okay, no. He's gonna cheat. Anyway, there's 5. We'll come up with 6 hopefully by the time the whole thing goes off. But anyway, so when we talk about being glad to be with people, you're so close.
I
Just
am.
keep touching you.
Okay,
in the 6 big emotions, of which we can only remember 5. That's kind of an advanced level skill.
Yeah.
Because gosh, being glad to be with someone who's angry, especially if they're angry at me.
Yeah.
Whew, feeling glad to be with somebody who is hopeless, or feeling glad to be with somebody who is disgusted, disgusted with me, somebody who's sad. When people
In the middle of shame,
right? Shame's the worst, because shame is having a feeling that no one's glad to be with you.
Right.
That is the definition of shame. So that takes some extra skill. But so that's the ultimate goal.
Yes.
That's not something that I think people will become aware of that this week. But how do I today? And I kind of already have my answer, so I'm going to ask you a question and then answer it. Question is, how do I today begin to build joy capacity today? So if joy is defined by the experience of knowing that someone is glad to be with me, who is the ultimate person that knows me inside and out and is still glad to be with me?
Absolutely. So Jesus, God,
right,
our Heavenly Father,
right. So we've probably experienced a lot of times on earth where people haven't been glad to be with us.
That is correct.
So that's tough, because some of us may even be starting with kind of like holes in our joy bucket.
Yep.
So how can I begin to experience knowing that God is glad to be with me in all times? So we talked a little bit about manual journaling.
Manual journaling. Practicing appreciation, I think, is a big one, and that's simply just being thankful for different times in your life, and for things that have brought you joy, things that the Lord, or that you felt a time where you felt joy, a time where you felt happy, peace, or connected.
So are you saying, like, even just thinking about times that joy has happened,
the experience of
joy has happened, but maybe you didn't have a definition for it,
right?
So not even necessarily looking for new joy moments today, although I think people now have a different definition and could find them in their daily life
today. Yep.
But even getting to go back and think about, when were times that people were really glad to be with me, or when were times that God was really glad to be with me and I experienced that. Yeah.
And even asking him, like, where were you? Or what's your take or your remembrance of this time that I was happy, and this time that I was, were you there? Lord, show me where you were. What were you saying? What were you thinking? How were you,
how did you see
How
me?
did you see me in that moment? And that begins to rebuild that joy bucket, or to begin to give you joy capacity.
Right. Because joy capacity, let's sum it up with some things that we'll talk about coming up of why joy is important. So joy capacity gives you the ability to endure trauma.
Yes, endure trauma, endure hardship.
Life is hard. That's guaranteed.
Yep.
So having joy capacity to be able to work through tough moments is critically important. Actually, that is part of what causes trauma, is when you don't have the joy capacity to live through it, and you don't have people around you that have joy capacity to live through it.
And
that's not a typical definition, but that really is the ultimate what's going on.
Yeah, and you feel like you're alone and that no one understands.
Trauma happens when you're alone, and you don't have the resources within yourself to manage the crisis.
Right. And so being able to go back to some of those moments and know that and find Jesus in those moments.
Well, that's a whole different story.
Sorry, I went to next level.
We'll talk about that in another video.
Sorry.
What does it look like to process trauma through a joy filter, and knowing that God was glad to be with us? That's a whole different
Whole
topic.
another topic.
Good one though.
Yeah.
I was just wanted to
Sorry.
allude to that.
Yes.
That's part of why joy capacity is important
Yes.
and why we're
To be
talking
able to-
about.
yes.
It's like, why are we talking about joy?
Right. Well,
Who cares?
who cares?
Like we care because we understand
Yeah.
the value of it now, but I don't think this is something that's typically talked about.
yeah, and another thing I think too for joy is that's important with that is attachment and identity.
Yeah. Talk about the identity piece and
Yeah.
why that matters.
And we'll talk more about this, but what it looks like is so very quickly, and so we're gonna go a little brain development. So in your brain development, what happens is your brain starts in the back and it goes up and forward. And so back here is your attachment center. So this is the very first thing when you're born. This is the only thing that's fully developed is your attachment center. So you need. So everything that happens in those first few months of life is about you attaching to someone,
and knowing that
someone is glad to be with you,
just for being,
right. Just for being born, for breathing. Because as infants, all you can do is receive, and so you need to receive. You're receiving joy,
right?
And so what happens is, as your brain grows and as you grow, then what happens is your joy center is here. So your attachment connects to your joy center. Then what this does is this builds joy because you know that people are glad to be with you.
Right.
But also what's right next to your joy center is your identity.
Right, which is
which is
mind-blowing.
Huge. And
Yeah.
so your identity comes from your joy center, which comes from your healthy attachments.
Which altogether is I am who I am because people are glad to be with me.
So in saying that, like Janelle was saying, if you're able to understand and know that God is glad to be with you
in all
times, in all situations, it's building up your joy capacity, which in turn creates your identity of
secures your identity for sure.
Yeah, secures your identity in Christ.
Right.
And so that's how you can have secure identity in your family if you know that your family is glad to be with you in the middle of all the hardship, or your friends that they're glad to be with you in the middle of all the junk. Then your identity is connected. I know who I am. I'm secure. I have a secure relationship and secure identity with my friends, my family, myself, because I'm glad to be myself in miserable situations, and with God.
Right. Which I think just made me think of this. So shame, the definition of shame is feeling that no one is glad to be with me.
Right.
Because I've done something
Because I'm bad.
Because I'm bad. I've done something that would cause people not to be glad to be with me.
Yes.
In my mind.
Yes.
And often that I'm not glad to be with myself, right? So isn't that like mind-blowing to think that people live in shame, which is just the belief that people are not glad to be with me. And so what does it look like to grow out of that, which would be another interesting thing. But when you were talking, I was just, another point that I want to make just as an allusion or to allude to what we're going to talk about too is the difference between joy attachment and fear attachment.
Yes.
So our bodies run on fear or joy. And if we have a fear attachment, then, and it's connected parallel with that identity, then my identity comes from this weird fear of, do people want to be with me?
Right.
I don't know. And so then it's really hard to have a secure identity and really know who I am because I have a broken attachment with people.
Yeah.
I don't have an experience of people are glad to be with me at all times.
And there's different levels of that, but
right.
Absolutely.
But we'll be talking about that.
Yeah.
So keep an ear open for that.
Yeah.
But also too, one other thing I wanted to allude to because of the attachment piece. So you were talking about attachment obviously is I'm attached to you, which means that I have a connection with you that goes beyond hey, how are you?
Right.
There's actually a bonding that has happened.
Yeah.
And that happens
word,
through joy.
Yes.
Through experiencing over time that you are glad to be with me.
Yes.
Both by by what your face is telling me, both by what your body has told me in situations, both in good moments and in bad moments. So what I wanted to mention is what if we've gotten salvation wrong?
Yeah.
In that it's not a knowing that Jesus died for me because I was a sinner or am a sinner. Not this knowing here.
Yeah.
But what if it's the experience of the deep knowing of his attachment and bonding to me, that he truly, truly, truly is glad to be with me in every situation? Would that not rewrite our salvation story?
That's fantastic.
if
Yeah.
that was truly what we understood. So I think too, we need to talk a little bit more about this, but in scripture, when it talks about the joy of the Lord is my strength, I don't know about you guys, but I always thought like, oh, being happy about the Lord is my strength. Like, okay, what is that? Sure. What if it is the experience of the deep
Yes.
knowing that the Lord is glad to be with me at all times, just for me being me, breathing.
Yes.
That is my strength. Well, isn't that true? Doesn't that ring true to
Yeah,
you? It rings
absolutely.
true to me
Rings
of
true to
like,
me.
like that is my strength in tough situations,
So-
knowing that he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Whether I handle this awesome or whether I handle this really poorly because I'm still just a kid who's learning.
Yeah.
And I'm human at that. Like he's not going anywhere.
No.
That's my strength.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome. And then, yeah. I
Yeah.
could go on, but we need to.
yeah, we want to button up. We want to keep
Yeah.
these short just so you can listen to them in snippets.
Yeah, and I want to. So I want to end with this. So I think there's a scripture that I think it's Psalm 16:11.
You said 16:11, but honestly,
Well,
in
it's a part of it, but basically.
Passion Translation, it's not coming out
No.
the same way. So
Okay.
go for it.
So in that middle stanza, there's like I think it's kind of broken up in three different parts, but in that middle part, it says, "In your presence there is fullness of joy." So think about that. So if he's glad to be with us, so that means that in his presence is where I know that he's glad to be with me. There's the fullness of him being glad to be with me.
Yeah, where I'm fully getting to experience it.
Yep. And I'm fully able to be glad to be with him.
Right. So good because it is cyclical.
Yes.
We talked about this yesterday and I still don't have words for it, but that synergistic happening of like
Yeah.
when I'm glad to be with you and you're glad to be with me, like the whole world could be melting away. Like it doesn't even matter. There's
Right.
something so beautiful and rich about that. And that's exactly what what you just said.
Yeah.
In your presence is fullness of joy. Not only knowing
That's
that he and experiencing he's glad to be with us, but what does it look like when we're fully glad to be with him?
Yes.
Worship would change.
Worship would absolutely change.
Yeah. That's cool.
And it would change
That's
every
fun.
day, not just in a gathering.
Right. Yeah.
And that's speaking to myself.
Yeah. So good.
So,
Okay,
Wow.
well there's some pieces of joy and I think this conversation will go on for a
Yeah.
little bit. There's so much to unpack here
Yeah.
in such a simple concept. We pray that you will be wrecked
yes.
by joy.
And look for experiences and look for moments of joy.
And look for the word joy.
Yeah.
Check in every time you see the word joy, and I pray that the Holy Spirit causes it to happen often.
Yes.
That you just check in. Am I glad to be with me? Where's the Lord? Is he glad to be with me?
Yeah.
Who am I with? Am I glad to be with them? And reminding yourself that that's what this life experience is all about.
Yes.
We forget that we were put on this earth for relationship.
Yep.
We weren't put on this earth to do the things that we actually
And we
do
were-
every day
yeah.
while we're staying disconnected from
Yeah.
ourselves and God.
And
others.
joy is who we are.
It really
Because
is
that's
to
who
do.
he is. And so he created us to be joy and to live out of joy.
Yeah, he did. He created us to be with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so there's such beauty in that. But all right, guys,
guys.
we'll see you next week.
It's been
And
really good.
yep, go live in joy.
All right. See you guys.